Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Charles Sabansi. I want to welcome you guys to another episode of the Dreamerspro Show, where we cover everything from sports, hot topics, classic debates, entertainment, and we give you guys a fresh perspective on things and how we see them. And today we got a pretty interesting show for you guys. But before we get into it, please make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now we're going to be talking a little bit more about Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers and the situation that they got going on there. As you guys may be aware, Kawhi Leonard and Paul George have made some news over the last few days because of a response video that Stephen A. Smith put out in response to, Paul George? Because Paul George talked about Stephen A. Smith on the show, where he basically said that Stephen A. Smith has no right to talk about, you know, coming back and playing and all of that stuff when he's never played basketball. And then Stephen A. Smith, he did an entire show addressing what Paul George said, and various people went back and forth about it, right? In the midst of all of that, however, there's something kind of hanging over the Los Angeles Clippers, which is the Clippers find themselves in a very interesting spot because now they are tasked with the responsibility of figuring out whether or not they want to offer both Kawhi Leonard and Paul George contract extensions. As you guys may be aware by now, Kawhi Leonard and Paul George have simply not been available for the Clippers essentially since they got them, right? Obviously, they had the bubble year, but the very next season, Paul George played 48 games. The season after that, he played 54 games. The season after that, he played 31 games. And then last year, he played 56 games and missed the playoffs because he was injured. Kawhi Leonard, his first year with the Clippers, he played 57 games. That was because of the lockout. The bubble, excuse me. And then, of course, the very next season, he only played 52 games. And then he missed an entire year. And then last year, he played 52 out of the available 82 games. And then, of course, he was only able to play the first two games. Only able to play the first two games in the first round of these particular playoffs, and he got injured after two games, right? So it wasn't a good time. So essentially what happened was I was doing some research this morning and I came across an article on Fadeaway World, but it was kind of linking to the podcast, the ESPN podcast called Hoops Collective. And in this podcast, they were essentially discussing the probability of the Clippers offering two max contract extensions to both Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. And essentially during this show, Brian Windhorst and others said they see absolutely no way that the Clippers will offer both Kawhi Leonard and Paul George max extensions. So what we want to do is want to quickly play this conversation for you guys here, and then we're going to come back and continue on with the show. Take a listen to that there.
So Paul George and Kawhi Leonard can both extend for 4 seasons and $224 million. Kawhi can extend now. Paul has to wait until September 1st to extend. I don't know if there's any chance that those guys get 4-year extensions. They both can be free agents after next season because they have player options. There's no chance that they're getting extended 4 years. I would be stunned if they get extended 4 years. That doesn't mean that they can't get extended, though, and that the Clippers won't make an offer, maybe even a multi-year offer. And this is one of the big questions, I think, for this upcoming season that hasn't been answered yet. What are the Clippers going to do with PG and Kawhi? And McMahon, I think, obviously health plays a huge factor here, but also leverage. Typically, a player is a star player has the leverage because he's like, well, listen, if you don't sign me, I'm going to be an unrestricted free agent. I'm going to walk. There's certainly interest in these guys, but I don't know how much there's a belief that these guys would leave Los Angeles.
Well, yeah, there's that. And like, also I'd be curious to see exactly how much interest there would be. Obviously, we're talking about all NBA talent, with Kawhi multi-times finals MVP, but like, there's teams that aren't going to be really excited about signing up for, hey, you play when you want to play. And it's not just a game to game type situation, but like it's a half to half kind of situation. And I think the Clippers have leaned so much into, obviously, open up this potential championship window. When you get a Kawhi Leonard in free agency and a Paul George and kind of as part of that free agency, you're going to, those guys will have control of the franchise. And you kind of get a sense that they're trying to figure out, hey, what's the right mix here between us actually being able to run our team and having those guys be the star players. And the deal hasn't produced what the Clippers were anticipating. That's for sure. I don't know. This one's tough. And the other factor is the Clippers are opening up a new arena.
That is, there's the other factor, which is James Harden.
Yeah.
And if they are able to execute that type of trade, number one, do they extend Harden?
They can't
extend. You're
That's
right. Number one, do they wait and see how that group looks together? Number two, is that something that, acquiring Harden changes the calculus? I don't know. I just know there's a lot of unanswered questions with the Clippers right now.
So you heard what they said, that he doesn't see it happening. Now, listen, Kawhi Leonard's stock has dropped considerably, and it has really nothing to do with his basketball game. Because when Kawhi Leonard is healthy, I personally believe he's one of the 3 best players in the world. Obviously, people are going to push back on me, but that's what I believe when he's healthy. But the problem is that he's never healthy, right? So I'm fully aware of how it sounds, saying, well, trying to argue with people, oh, if he's healthy, that's a losing battle, because people are always going to say, but when is he healthy? So I don't even engage in that argument, because it's not smart on my end, because I'm never going to win it. So I just try to avoid it altogether, because I know what the pushback is going to be. People are going to say, but he's never healthy, so we don't want to hear that. So I understand that, and I don't try to make that argument. But I do think that the issue with Kawhi Leonard is obviously his availability, right? Number one. Number two, Kawhi Leonard does also have a reputation of load managing, which also hurts his entire reputation altogether, right? He low manages, and in the fact he's never healthy. In the case of Paul George, Paul George has also had some injuries as well, right? And if you're looking at these 2 stars, as a matter of fact, when they lost in the first round, I was one of the people that actually said they should consider breaking up this duo. I initially said that. Now, I have said that if I were them, I would probably move Paul George. Some people have pushed back on me, like, Tour Off for Sports. He didn't push back directly on me, but he pushed back on the notion of, why would you trade Paul George when he's usually more available than Kawhi Leonard? And my response to that is, if we're looking at both of these players, both of them are injury prone. But Kawhi Leonard, however, is the better player. Right? So when you have him, he's certainly the better player. I didn't see a way, for instance, I'll give you guys an example of what I mean. If you had replaced Kawhi Leonard with Paul George in the first round of the playoffs against the Phoenix Suns, I thought that the Clippers would have absolutely zero chance of beating the Suns. But if you have Kawhi Leonard without Paul George and the rest of the cast that they had, I thought they had a chance to beat them. I think Kawhi is that much better than Paul. Not that Paul George isn't a great player, he is, but I believe Kawhi Leonard is better. So if you're considering both of these guys, you're taking a risk any way you look at it, because they're both injury prone. So for me, I would kind of roll the dice on the guy that I believe has a higher ceiling and that can give me more when he's available, right? So that's kind of how I would kind of decide whether or not who I would trade, but this is just me, right? Now, we've had some people out there saying, no, let's keep them, let's give it one more shot. But to me, man, I would do something else, because essentially what's going to happen is the Clippers are going to go into this season hoping and wishing, and that's a very bad place to be as an organization, because you're pretty much holding your breath for the entire season just waiting for something to go wrong. Like that's not a fun place to be as an organization, if we're being honest if I'm being honest. So I think the report that these guys just laid out, I think there's some truth to it. I think there's some serious trepidation there. And I mean, because if you're going to do that, you're going to commit a lot of money to these guys, right? So to commit all of that money, of course, they brought in the vantage point of the new arena. You're going to want someone to sell tickets and, be a draw to draw people into the arena. So the Clippers find themselves in a very precarious position because now you put forth this capital investment in this arena, right? And you got to fill in the seats and all of this stuff. These guys have put all this money down, and these guys, I'm talking about Steve Ballmer and ownership and these guys. So they put all of this money down, and you're going to need a return. You're going to need a draw. And it's going to be very hard to draw fans in when you have an amalgamation of essentially role players. You're going to need some star names, some marquee names to bring into the building. And also it helps if you're winning games and going to the playoffs. So the Clippers are in a very, very tough spot because I believe they hedged their bet on this duo, right? And I want to quickly close on this one point here. Paul George is, if I'm not mistaken, during the playoffs, if I'm not mistaken, I think Paul George's show was releasing episodes during the playoffs or towards when the team was getting ready for the playoffs. And I said it then, and I'm going to say it now. I said I thought that was a bad look. I thought it was a bad look. Some people pushed back on me, and they were like, nah, what do you expect? Like, he's going to rehab, and then what you expect him to rehab all day long? And I'm like, listen, this is not a good look. Why? Because number one, you're dealing with a fan base that is extremely frustrated. And if I'm being honest, I think Clipper fans could care less if they saw Paul George sitting on a podcast. If I'm just being totally honest with you, I think Clipper fans would only want to see Paul George either on the court or doing some workout footage or rehab footage. But to see him in a podcast and he's just there talking, trust me, that wasn't a good look in my personal view. To me, I think you got to sense the moment. Because at that point, fans are anxious. They're anxious. They're grasping at straws. Kawhi Leonard has gone down. Is Paul George going to play? And trust me, it seemed like if it was me, I would have shut it down, man. Because I'd have been like, no, and ain't nobody trying to see me right now. Right? Ain't nobody trying to see me right now. Like, that's just me. That is just me, and maybe I'm different in that way, but I would have shut it down, right? Not saying that you don't live your life and all of that stuff. Nobody's saying that. You can live your life, but I would live it out of the public eye because the minute they're seeing you and they're looking at you, fans are going to be like, well, can he play? I mean, he looks pretty comfortable. Before that, it starts all of this kind of talk. And to me, I just didn't think it was a good look. But, that's just me. To me, I just think you got to be able to read the room, man. You got to be able to read the room. And, if you look at your team, and in this case, your fan base, and you see them grasping at straws for anything to get some type of help in the playoffs, at a moment like that, people want to see you looking sad. People want to see you, looking down or like working. I'm telling you, nobody wants to see you smiling at that point, laughing. They don't want to see it. Is it right or wrong? You know what? I don't think it's wrong, to be totally frank with you. I don't think it's wrong. The fans have a right to have an opinion about stuff like that because they're paying you $50 million a year. So what is this? Like, well, you're saying, well, I'm not allowed to be a human being. Nobody's saying you're not allowed to be a human being, but you're beholden to some of these fans because they're the ones paying you. You work for the fans, whether you want to believe it or not. Because if the fans don't participate, they don't patronize the product, where's the money coming from? So you got to be cautious of that. You really, really got to be sensitive about that. If it's just me. So I think you got to be aware of it. And sometimes you forego certain, certain luxuries. Now you may say, am I an animal? Please stop. There are people that work just as hard as the next guy and they don't earn millions of dollars a year and they got to do it every single day. Nobody's here feeling sorry for, I'm not feeling sorry for nobody. So to me, I thought it was a bad look, and I'm not coming off that position. People are going to disagree, whatever, but that's just my opinion on that. When your team is struggling, you're not there, and the reason you're not there is because you're injured. Don't nobody want to see you talking about basketball. That's just me. I could be wrong. I would shut it down. You're not seeing me. And what am I talking about? I ain't got nothing to talk about. But that's just me, right? And that's my opinion. It's my right to it. I don't have to agree with what other people think. You can disagree. It's your right, your prerogative, but that's the opinion I hold, and I don't see myself coming off of that anytime soon. Whatever you guys think, please leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section. We catch you guys on the next show.